Hello and welcome. I call the channel the Jungle Nook, and although spring has officially been here for over a month now, the weather outside where I live, the temperatures are just now starting to go up, and before you know it, I'll be moving some of these plants out onto the porch. But before I do that, while I still have them all indoors and pretty much in one area, I'm going to go around and fertilize everything with a slow release fertilizer, and a bunch of these plants are going to get a top dressing of fresh organics. So for the fertilizer, the slow release fertilizer, I'm just using this right here. Osmocote Plus, might have pronounced it wrong, but this is an all-purpose fertilizer. It's got all of the primary, secondary, and trace elements that a plant will need. Well, they say it lasts 6 months. I don't know about that, but I think it would depend on how frequently and how heavily you water your plants, because it is mostly a salt that has nutrients in it. And when you water, it dissolves the salt and releases the nutrients. So I would think the more you water, the quicker this stuff, gets used up. And I like this because you don't got to worry about missing a fertilizing if you're, using like a liquid fertilizer on a schedule. Really like this stuff. It's convenient. But also, I'll be using worm castings as well. And the worm castings, this is very nutrient rich. It's basically like a compost. Very nutrient rich, but it's really fine. It's real small pieces, real tiny. But this is good because you can just add a little bit of this right on the top of the soil of your pot, and when you water, it will wash some of that nutrients because it's already so small. These little fine particles will get washed right down into the soil of the pot. And I'll show an experiment with this later to show exactly what I mean and what's happening in your pots. I got some topsoil. I would never recommend putting topsoil into a potted plant because it really will compact over time, and it's not good for drainage or water retention or nothing like that. But I'm not potting up plants with this material. I have some plants that, there's a big space between the soil and the top of the pot, and I'll just use a little bit of this in conjunction with something else that I have laying around, which is some humus and manure. It's all organic. It will all break down. Some orchid potting mix, which is basically bark of various sizes within that bag. And I'll show you how these look. I'll put them in this little tote here to show you how they look. Topsoil is great outdoors in your vegetable garden, your raised beds, things like that, but I wouldn't fill a pot with topsoil and pot a plant up that way. I would use something that's mostly like peat moss or cocoa coir, something like that. So it's mostly, small little pieces, but there's some twigs and different things in here too, which are a little bit larger, but it's still, they're small pieces. And then over here, this humus and manure. So this will be even more nutritious than just that topsoil. I'm gonna put some of this in here. And some of this here, this orchid potting mix, which is mostly bark. What I'm going to do, I'm just tipping it upside down, not squeezing it at the bottom of the bag. I'm just kind of shaking it so some of the smaller stuff ends up at the top of the bag. So this stuff is much more chunky. It's going to take longer for it to break down. And I'm going to put that in there. And again, this is just for the pots that have a big space at the top. I put a lot of organics into some of my pots here, and some of these plants have not been up potted in 2 years. So the soil level has gone down as the beneficial organisms in the soil have been breaking down the organics. So, this stuff's pretty good. A lot of different size pieces of organic material in here, a variety of different things. So I'm not going to just put a real thick layer of worm castings that are kind of expensive compared to this. It's probably only cost me $1, if that. This bag, I believe, was only, I think it was under $5. The other bag of the manure there, I think that was about $5. And I don't even know what I paid for this, but yeah, all of this right here is probably $1. I'm going to take some of this material, put it in this net. That's this material right here that I made up of the topsoil and stuff. And in this one, I'm going to put some of the worm castings. Take some water. This is what's referred to as compost tea. This is what the water looks like after it runs through that material. And it's dirty because the water has picked up all of the really, really super tiny particles of the organic material and the nutrients already. And every time you water, this stuff is filtering down throughout all the soil. And that is the how the organics and the nutrients is working its way down into the soil. And then when the plants suck up this water, it's got the nutrients right in it. So I'm just using this material with just stuff I had laying around, but it is fresh organics. It's a lot cheaper than just using the worm castings. The worm castings are real easy with pots where you don't have a lot of space to work with. So this is a Baltic blue pothos. And if you look in here, you'll see there's not much space between the soil and the top of the pot. So in a situation like this is where I will use the slow release fertilizer first. And then I'll just take a little bit of the worm castings and just kind of sprinkle it over the top. That's it. Kind of spread it out evenly. Didn't put too much in. I put like I think 3 or 4 tablespoons in. You're not going to burn your plants with worm castings, but you do want to be careful and use the that slow release fertilizer as directed. And if you can, you would want to keep it away from the stems of the plants too. And then after that, I'll just give it a little bit of water, and that will help clean it off, the little pieces that were stuck to the stems and stuff, and start working it down into the soil. So here's a banana plant right here. I'm gonna pretty much do the same thing, but I'm gonna use the that top dressing that I mixed up in this one because there's quite a bit of space. I wouldn't want to just use the worm castings. They cost a little bit more. So I'm going to do the same thing. Just give it a little bit of this slow release fertilizer. And a bit of a top dressing. if that was just worm castings, I would have just used up almost the whole container. And just put a little bit of this, spread it out a little bit, and that's it. Every time I water, some of that slow release fertilizer will be getting broken up or dissolved into the soil, but also some fresh organics will be working their way down. And I've just replaced a lot of the soil that had broken down. This didn't have that much of a gap in it 2 years ago or a year ago. I don't even know, I think this thing's only a year old. It started out something small like this. Banana plants grow really fast. I just put a bunch of that fertilizer in this cup to make it easier for me. First thing I'm gonna do is just go around the room and put the fertilizer in.